Hello and welcome to The Left Wing, a brand new podcast where we take a look at Labour politics as well as the world from a left-wing point of view. My name is David Allum and I will be your host each week, joined by an eclectic mix of guests, talking about a smorgasbord of topics. My guests for episode 1 are two very close friends of mine from the Stockport area. First, he is the secretary of the Greater Manchester Fabians and all-round workhorse for the party. Ladies and gentlemen, David Meller.
Hello.
Woo!
Hello. Hello.
How are you doing, mate?
I'm very well, Tal. Yeah, it's lovely to be here. Oh, yes, I'm very well. Yeah, no, it's
brilliant. For those listeners that may have never heard of them, can you just give us a quick overview of the Fabians and what you get up to?
Yeah, so basically we're Britain's oldest political think tank, and we're founded sort of in the 1880s actually, and we've always been at the forefront of developing political ideas and public policy from the left. So my job as secretary of the Greater Manchester Fabians, which we've just managed to kick off again, is to essentially make sure all the members know what we're doing and to help organise events, promote the local society, and to try and gain a presence within Greater Manchester ultimately, to try and sort of influence how public policy is formed within the Greater Manchester area, particularly devolution coming and obviously with Brexit as well. Obviously will always be ever looming, I think, for God knows how long, as we'll probably discuss later.
We're all about cheap plugs on the left wing, so if anyone wants to get in touch with the Great Manchester Fabians or join the Fabians...
well, this is the thing, because we're quite new, we haven't even got a Facebook and a Twitter page yet. Give it the email address. It's gmfabians@icloud.com. So if you want to email me for now, and then we're getting there. We've just done our first MailChimp, so that's all out now. So we've emailed everyone, but yeah, we've still got to get all that sorted out with that new, or rather not that new. We've only just gotten going over the last couple of weeks, so we're getting there, and we're hoping to have our first event all organised and sorted out very, very soon. We've got a couple of events that we're hoping to get organised with some quite big names actually.
Excellent.
So we're nearly there with those now. So yeah, if you want to email me for now.
I'm sure people can also Google Fabian Society.
Oh yeah, and it's all on there. You'll be able to find my details on there in the local Fabians section actually, yeah, so you better email me through there as well.
Excellent. Yeah. My other guest this evening is the youth officer for Stockport constituency Labour Party and a guy that is too nice for politics, Mr. Daniel Allum.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
How you doing, Daniel?
Really good. Yeah, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to make my podcast debut.
Podcast debut on the left wing debut. It's a day of firsts. when we've grown to the point where we're not broadcasting from my spare bedroom and instead we're in a lavish studio on sofa keys, we can think back about this day.
Of course,
as the first.
I look forward to it.
So, again, just for anyone that's just tuning in, if you could just give us a bit of an overview about what you guys get up to in Young Labour.
Yep. So, Young Labour is a group within the Labour Party that is responsible for recruiting and engaging young members in the party, giving them a voice on a national platform, as well as a regional and a local platform. In Stockport, I'm the youth officer for our constituency, and that involves going out and talking to young members in Stockport, see how they want to get involved, see what they want to focus on campaign-wise, what topics are important to them. And that's involved in that is working with the wider party, so the constituencies, the older members, and the structures that are already in place to give young members a voice.
And you're also in the process of setting up the Young Labour group for Stockport?
We are indeed. The process has been formalised now for a Stockport Young Labour group to be created. So the next steps, we will be holding a launch event on Wednesday the 7th of December at 7 miles out in Stockport Town Centre, which is a fantastic venue for that kind of event, and that will be our first opportunity really to identify the priorities of young members in Stockport.
I didn't even need to ask Daniel for the cheap plug. He was right in there with 7 miles on, all over it. If anyone wants to check out or get more information in the meantime, anywhere they can go to?
We do have a Facebook group, that is Stockport Young Labour.
Brilliant. And in terms of cheap plugs as well, we always want to hear from you guys listening. Just a quick shout out, in case you want to get in touch. You can get in touch with us on Facebook, search The Left Wing. On Twitter, we are at The Left Wing Show, and you can also email us, theleftwingpodcast@gmail.com. So all complaints to the email address, please, so I can just throw them in my spam folder. Tonight, we have got, I think, only one topic we can really kick off with and focus on tonight, and that is, of course, the downfall of Jim Callaghan's government in the early 90s. No, I'm only messing about. It is, of course, Theresa May's treehouse of terror, Brexit. It has been going not so well for old Mrs. May over the past 7 days. The High Court have ruled that her and her merry band of Brexiteers cannot just invoke Article 50, and they will require consent from Parliament. Daniel, I'll come to you first. Did the High Court get it right?
Yes. Yes, in my opinion, all the judges have done, and I know they've come under flack for it, but all the judges have done is protect our parliamentary sovereignty and ensure that Parliament can hold the government to account on the decision.
Which is basically what everybody wanted when they voted for Brexit. Exactly. Anyway, they wanted parliamentary sovereignty. This is how it works.
Prime beef British law. Prime beef British law, isn't it? You know, it's not just law; it's British law, and and the judgment's been made. This is all this crowing on from the Brexit campaign. Well, not from the Brexit campaign really, but from the Brexiteers. Because actually, Dominic Cummings, to be fair, who was the head of Vote Leave, he's actually come out with a lot of very reasonable comments in post that judgment, and he was basically saying, this ultimately the Vote to Leave was about to restore, for British law to take precedent, and for British law and for judges, to use British law to make these decisions, and ultimately Parliament needs to be involved with this, even if it's just to nod it through. It's difficult to say. I mean, I can understand their frustration.
The other thing is, as well, we should just point out that there are conspiracy theories saying basically this is the establishment and everything. We have an independent judiciary.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
That is how we the world over envy the complete independence of our judiciary. They made their decision. It's obviously just for the purposes of balance. We do have to point out that it could still be overturned at the Supreme Court.
Yeah. Yes. So the judges weren't ruling on Parliament overturning the Brexit vote. They were ruling that Parliament should hold the government to account and make sure that we are exiting the EU on terms that are agreeable to the majority of the country and not just to a minority in the Tory government.
Exactly, and here's the interesting thing. Then you mentioned scrutiny, and I'll come to you first, David. Now, there's been many different versions from the political leaders regarding what level of scrutiny Parliament should have, whether it should go through the whole committee phase, whether it should just be a quick debate and then a vote, whether it's how it's going to work exactly. Well, my question is, how much should the government have to tell the Parliament? Because will they, if they say too much, playing devil's advocate here, they will undermine the negotiating position when they go to it.
Whichever way you look at this, all you see is a mess, isn't it? Because you can look at it in terms of, well, if the government come to Parliament and say, well, these are our starting points, people say, well, hang on a minute, you've given the EU a free ride here in terms of dictating the negotiations. So in that sense, you can't win. We can't just nod it through. Obviously, the vote's taken place. I campaigned so hard for Remain, and when the vote didn't go the Remain way, it felt awful, and it felt like a bit. I think when people have said it was like a bit like a bereavement, which I guess is a bit hyperbolic, but I can understand that point of view. But anyway, the vote has happened, and it does need to go through. From my point of view, we can't be backtracking on this now, because if we do, particularly from the Labour Party's point of view, and as we'll probably discuss in due course, the view from the Labour side is all over the place. But ultimately, I'm with Keir Starmer on this. I mean, I bloody love Keir Starmer. I think since he popped since the reshuffle, and from the moment he stood at the dispatch box, and the minute he said, it's the terms that we need to go over, and that's where I come from. It's to have that debate over the terms. But I guess it's how we reach that debate and how we have that debate in order to try and ultimately achieve what we want. So, the government could say we're going to have these starting points. I mean, for me, even if they were quite broad, would that be enough, perhaps? But again, you can argue, why are we showing our hand? This is why I wonder whether wherever I look, I just think, well, there's an obstacle, there's an obstacle, there's an obstacle. I sometimes just think, should we just have a general election and be done with this? That's how I feel at the moment at times. Just so, does Labour... should Labour campaign on sort of a soft Brexit platform? For me, could that be the answer? I don't know. This is the problem. I don't know which is the best way to handle it. I just see mess, just a torrent of mess wherever you go, whichever route you go down. It's awful.
The thing is, David, you're not alone. Literally every single person in the country, including those that need to be making this decisions,
yeah, indeed,
don't know.
No, exactly.
Nobody knows. Theresa May doesn't know. Boris Johnson doesn't know. Who's the Brexit minister again?
David Davis.
Davis, that's the one. So good they named him twice. He doesn't know. Nobody knows. Daniel, should Theresa May be forced to go through a very sort of, by the nature of it, parliamentary scrutiny is very in-depth and takes a while and every detail's covered. How does Theresa May present the argument to Parliament without giving away, showing our cards to Europe?
Well, that's the thing. We shouldn't, in my opinion, be expecting Theresa May to come out and lay out her whole negotiating strategy. It wouldn't make sense at this point. It would show our hand, as she is saying. I agree with her on that front. She shouldn't be showing her hand this early, before the proper negotiations have started. In terms of parliamentary scrutiny, I think what the government need to be coming to Parliament with is, as Jeremy Corbyn was asking for, their Brexit bottom line. What they won't sacrifice to leave the European Union. They should be coming to Parliament and saying, this is what we will definitely protect, or this is what we will definitely be looking to achieve from the negotiations. We don't want all the detail, but we want clear headers to ensure that market confidence stays in Britain and that the pound doesn't fall further, as it has done since June. We need that confidence in the government to be able to see that they are going to protect workers' rights, potentially single market access. I think that's what we should expect from Theresa May.
Let me ask this question though. At this very early stage in negotiations, should the UK be ruling anything out at this point?
There are certain elements of our membership of the European Union that people weren't happy with. That we can focus on immigration, the single market access. They were all topics that were brought up during the EU referendum campaign. There are going to be things that I don't think we should sacrifice. Access to the single market is an example. I don't think we should lose that when we leave the European Union. On the other hand, there are things that can be sacrificed, and there are things that we will lose as a result of coming out of the European Union. There is lots of European funding that is going towards projects in Britain.
I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? Again, just to touch on what Keir Starmer said in the Commons.
Hashtag David loves Keir, apparently.
Oh, he's amazing. I love him. I mean, I'm not going to say much more, really. On that side of things. But I mean, it's the mandate for the terms. It's the mandate for the terms. Now, we've had the mandate to leave. That's fine. And that should go ahead, in my view. But it's the mandate for the terms. And this is why I just wonder whether the only thing I can see to get that mandate for the terms is to have a general election, and in each party almost sets out their own terms or their own bottom lines, shall we say, and then from there, ultimately it's up to the British public to give a mandate on those terms to a general election. Because I guess there's the other thing that I read about the other day was whether should Theresa May publish some sort of green paper. I mean, again that's another potential option, but it's getting the mandate for those terms. That's the big thing. We can't just we can't have a situation whereby we've got the government trying to organise a deal, and yet no one else within this country knows what that deal is about. Because ultimately, that doesn't, in terms of even not just the Remainers, even those who voted to leave, they need to know what they're going to be getting out of this, aside from the fact we'll be leaving. So this is what I'm wondering. Does there need to be a general election in order for there to be a mandate about the terms? And this is why I wonder whether, if there is an early general election, and obviously we know with the polls and everything with Labour at the moment, they're not the best, shall we say. But if we campaign on a soft Brexit platform, and I know there'll be loads of people who vote Labour who will say no, we should stay and we should try and remain with the EU regardless. For me, that's a terrible idea, because I think that would just cause untold damage. But that's only my point of view, and others will obviously probably disagree. Ultimately, if we campaign on a soft Brexit platform where we will say we'll enact Article 50, provided that we can have, for me, my sort of wish list would be to have single market access. And I think a good term that Tom Watson came up with at conference was to have firm but fair immigration. I think that's a really good term. I like that. Now, for me, I'm pro-immigration, but I know through the referendum, and even so, it's still very, very murky in terms of what the referendum told us in terms of the terms. As we know, people say, it was a vote against immigration. Well, was it a vote against immigration? It may have been quite.
I honestly think that oversimplifies things.
It does oversimplify.
It's a disservice to the electorate to say, do we just vote on immigration?
And I think this is a problem, I think, with politics at the moment, particularly in terms of where the Labour Party's gone. It's too binary at the moment. Politics has become very, very binary, and people are forgetting there are many shades of grey.
Let me just slam the brakes on it, because we're going to come to the Labour Party in a second.
Yeah.
I just want to put out a theory, and to be honest, I would say this is going to be controversial, but this is my sort of take on this at this point. I think this whole court case, High Court situation is a waste of time. And let me tell you why. No MP is going to be able to vote against triggering Article 50.
Okay.
Nobody's going to be able to do that.
I would disagree.
Yeah.
Except for the SNP.
And MPs who represent constituencies that voted to remain.
Because I would argue that gives them a justification to vote against it. If their constituency voted to remain, in the case of Stockport,
it passes. Even if you had them MPs and the SNP, it passes.
Oh yes, right? yeah, of course, yeah.
I think we're putting the cart before the horse here. Parliamentary scrutiny needs to come when we actually have some terms and a deal on the table. Then there needs to be a long period of parliamentary scrutiny. So I would suggest that Theresa May and the government, however much it pains me to say it, need to be left to go off and start these negotiations and sit down with European leaders and start trying to hash out hashing out a deal and find where the red lines are for Europe, bring it to Parliament, have it utterly scrutinised by both houses, and then the House could well turn around and say these terms are not acceptable in any way. You know what I mean? These on top of Conservative backbench sort of rebels, and because they've only got a majority of 12, and Labour and the SNP, the majority might well end up disagreeing with the terms.
Yeah.
In which case, then the question you've got to ask yourself is, we need a general election to bring someone else to the table who can actually negotiate the terms that the majority of Parliament can get behind. So I think I just feel like that stage of just voting to trigger Article 50 is a waste of time. We need to get around. We need to let May and a Brexit team have a go at the negotiations, bring that to Parliament, let it be scrutinised, and if Parliament decide, hey, you know what, these terms are not acceptable to the UK.
But the issue is that those final terms may not be with us until 2019. If the negotiations actually take the full 2 years,
and that's the issue as well, isn't it? Because the minute you enact Article 50, the clock is ticking, then, isn't it? So then you're up against the time limit, and then from there, then you could easily have a situation whereby you get to the end of 2 years and there's nothing, because you've got two sides. You've got you've got, I guess, the Remainers or the soft Brexiteers against the hard Brexiteers who are arguing, and ultimately you'll have no deal at the end at all.
I should have just pointed out there, I should have caveated that, because I had it in my head, that you would expect May and her front bench to report back to the House at some point, like in the sense of a budget or an autumn statement. It'd be rather than letting them just have the 2 years, we should say maybe after 9 to 12 months. We want like a budget style statement.
Well, that's what I think we should be arguing for now is a transparent approach throughout that 2-year period, but start that now.
Yeah.
Regardless of when Article 50 is going to be triggered. We've seen over the past couple of weeks the Nissan deal with the government that we still don't know the terms of. That it's had to go to the European Commission to make sure the UK government hasn't broken EU regulations in promising something that they aren't allowed to promise to Nissan. So why aren't we allowed to know those kinds of promises that are being made to private companies that will affect normal people as well?
This is the problem with the Conservative government now, aren't it? We're back to the old establishment. The public plebs don't need to know what we're up to. They'll just they'll take what we give them and like it. It's more, past the port. So with that, okay, so we've kind of gone over the procedure. There's been a lot of confusion this week on the Labour front bench regarding what Labour's policy is when it comes to Brexit, the High Court judgment, everything. We've heard about 15 different versions of events from Corbyn, from Keir, from everyone. Everyone's had to say, and every version's been different. Jeremy Corbyn did not win the leadership election in 2016. David Meller won the leadership election in 2016.
Gosh,
Where would you take the party when it comes to Brexit now?
You've got. I think you've got to respect the decision that's been made. It's a decision I hate, but you've got to respect the decision that's been made. So ultimately, for me, I would be campaigning, or I would be trying my best to get a soft Brexit. So to enact Article 50 and ultimately take us out eventually, because that's what the referendum result has told us to do. But ultimately, I would try and as best as I can to get the single market access. Now, whether it will be a Norwegian model or a Swiss model or whatever, I don't know, but that's probably a bit further down the line. Ultimately, it's to try and get single market access. But again, with the single market access, you then get into the immigration argument again, I suppose. So it's very difficult. I mean, like I say, what would firm and fair immigration look like? Again, I'm not really sure what it would look like either, because what's fair to me probably isn't fair to many other people. I don't know, but ultimately, it's to try and campaign on that soft Brexit platform. And again, as I come back to what I've said before, to get the mandate for the terms, how are you going to get the mandate for the terms? It's going to have to be done through some sort of election or some sort of vote. And whether that's a general election, a snap general election, or whatever, or it's through another referendum, which again you've got to be careful of, because ultimately a referendum on the terms could just become a referendum on whether to leave or remain again. So you've got to be very, very careful with that. But ultimately, I think where I stand now is that I would go for a soft Brexit approach, because we'd have to respect the referendum results. Ultimately, I think that's where we need to go.
I hate the term soft Brexit. I struggle to find how a soft Brexit actually goes about.
Well, I mean, I can. It's a different. Yeah, I mean, it's like getting divorced but still living together. Well, that's it. But I think at the same time, that's probably, in terms of many Labour not many Labour voters. I think certainly a significant proportion of Labour voters, and certainly those who, I guess, are more. In terms of their EU membership towards the centre, that's what they would prefer. And again, what we've got to look at as well ultimately is again is the UKIP vote. And again, we would be, I think, we'd be mullered ultimately if we decide to remain and not respect the wishes of those who decided to vote to leave. Because ultimately those who were traditional Labour voters who may decide to vote for UKIP or decided to vote Leave, we would lose them. And to be honest with you, rightly so, because we haven't listened to them. And I think ultimately if we had that sort of soft Brexit approach, it's a broad approach, and I think ultimately that would be the way where we can, to try and sort of appease as many people as possible. Ultimately, I guess I was thinking about this the other day. Is this sort of the new third way? Now, a lot of people will say, the third way is a dirty phrase because it's associations with Blair and so on. But ultimately, I think to try and be as broad and as comprehensive as we can in terms of the Labour vote and to try and represent as many views as we can, I think we can do that within that sort of soft Brexit approach, I think.
I will just point out, by the way, that we have just lost half of our listeners because David said the first swear word.
Swear word, God.
He said the B word, and now we've lost half the listeners. Daniel, it turns out there was a miscount and David didn't actually win the 2016 leadership election. It was yourself.
Okay. I won't make the same mistake of mentioning our 1997 leader. I agree, though, to be fair. For me, Labour Party policy nationally cannot be to oppose the Brexit result. It would be political suicide for us. As David said, it would hand votes to UKIP. I think approximately 70% of Labour constituencies voted to leave. Now, we can't ignore that. That is just a hard truth we're going to have to face. That doesn't mean, however, that we should be giving free rein to a Tory government to decide what terms we leave Europe on. As a Labour movement and as a Labour Party nationally, we need to be focusing on what terms we want to leave on, whether it comes to a general election or whether we just hold the government to account in Parliament. We need to decide, using common Labour values, what terms we want to leave on. Whether we want to guarantee access to the single market, what workers' rights we want to protect, if not all of them, protecting consumer rights, the environment, all the funding that the EU provides, especially to areas like the Northwest, where we've benefited greatly from European funding. How do we then protect that? Whether, as David said, through a general election where we get into government and provide that funding ourselves, or we pressure the government now to commit to protecting that funding. There are certain terms that we have to fight to protect, but no, I don't think we can't fight the result.
No, and this is interesting actually, because I agree. Again, we can't fight the result because, and I've said this in conversations that we've had over the past few days. It's, if nothing else, if you take the subject matter out and just look at it as a referendum, it would set a seriously dangerous precedent to defy a public referendum, advisory or not, and just go against the wishes of the people in a referendum. And the prime thing to look at there is, if we did that, the SNP could just say, oh well, the referendum on independence was advisory, so
that's true.
Bye everybody. Close the border.
It's a heart versus head decision, isn't it? And I think with particularly with the way that the Labour Party has acted, and as many members have acted, myself included, over the last couple of years. It's a heart versus head decision, isn't it? And we've got to try and think with our heads more than with our hearts, I think, ultimately. Because for my heart says, we remain, we say, no, we're staying, and that's that. But if we did that, it would unleash a torrent of, well, I won't swear, but you know what I mean. We've got to try and think this with our heads rather than going with our hearts on this ultimately. And I think for me that we've got to respect the referendum, because if we don't, I think we'll be tied us ultimately. I think really.
It's a very interesting point you both made there, and I just want to bring this into the discussion. We obviously, our Twitter account at the Left Wing Show, by the way, hit that follow button now, is still very young, but we ran a poll this week, and the poll said, with the High Court decision today, what should Labour's stance be on Brexit? The same question I've just posed to David and Daniel. I offered 4 options. It was either trigger Article 50, block Brexit, a new referendum, or a general election. 37% of the vote went to block Brexit. It was by far the winner of the people that we polled on Twitter. Yes. Now, again, should point out that I don't have verification methods. They might not have all been Labour members. So let's just make that clear. But by the looks of the result of the poll, I would imagine a fair lot of them were. 37% said block Brexit, 24% said new referendum, 21% said general election, and 18% said trigger Article 50. Now, we've mentioned it a few times, general election. Unfortunately, despite what Jeremy Corbyn said in the Mirror today, he doesn't have the power to trigger a general election. However, our esteemed Prime Minister does. So I'm taking you out of the Labour leadership position now and saying, if you are Theresa May, do you call it? And I'm going to caveat this first because there'll be loads of angry people in the comments on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook. Now, angrily typing away, hey, what are you talking about? There's a fixed term Parliament Act. There's no way she can call it. She can. There is plenty of scope in that legislation to call a general election whenever the hell she wants. So my question is, if you were Theresa May, do you call it a general election spring 2017 or autumn 2017? Daniel, you go first.
I would say spring. Get it out of the way early. We already know that there are going to be some key votes for the government over the next 12 to 18 months. We've got the Heathrow decision in approximately a year. We've got the Brexit terms. We've potentially got a decision to delay or cancel phase 2 of the Leverson inquiry. I think Theresa May should, if I was impartial, I would say Theresa May should call a general election, because using current polling figures and indications from polls, she would stand to increase a majority to a point where even a rebellion within her own backbench ranks would still mean she would win key votes like those.
Yes, and I've been studying polling data over the past week of the various polls that have been out. On average, under the current boundary review, not the current boundaries, the current constituencies, not the new boundary review, the Conservatives, if we went to the polls, if we went to a general election based on the polls, would end up with a majority close to 100, which is going to kill any rebellion. And bear in mind as well that with a majority of 12 and the amount her own party's disagreed with a lot of stuff she's done, a rebellion is highly likely, and especially with stuff like finance bills, the budget. There's been talk about ESA cuts and cuts to various welfare, because a lot of backbenchers don't like that. If a finance bill fails, we're looking at general election anyway.
Yeah, you are.
She's in a very unsteady position at the moment.
Yes.
With figures like Zach Goldsmith, Boris Johnson opposing the Heathrow decision, Stephen Phillips resigning over the Brexit negotiations, we assume. She is in a very risky position with such a small majority. I think she will be looking at how big of a majority she could have if she held a general election, and how much impetus that would then give her on such key votes.
I think the prize is too big at this point. David Meller, what would you do?
I think she'd be daft not to call. To be quite honest with you, with the way the polls are at the moment, I think she'd be daft not to. To be quite frank about it, I mean, I think the Stephen Phillips resignation, it was sort of like, push, and then a massive. He tried to make it a bit of a shove to try and, I think what's going on now is, I think we're beginning to get maybe the beginnings of some gesturing and some actions towards trying to push May into an early general election. And I think for me that the Phillips resignation seemed to feel like that to me. But I think she'd be daft not to. She'd be daft.
I just think with so much sort of infighting within our own party, because let's make one thing clear. We have been dragged through the press over the past 18 months about infighting. The Tories have been infighting as well. It's just they are very clever at covering it up, and also just decide to cut out the membership entirely, and that solves that problem.
Well, they're a machine. They win elections. They know how to win elections, and when it comes to the prize, they know how to win. And I think sometimes we don't have that cutthroat attitude. That rightly or wrongly, I don't know. I'm not saying that it's wrong or it's right that we haven't got that, but that's what they. I mean, you only have to look at over the decades that they've got that attitude that when it comes to the prize, they know they do what they need to do in order to get there.
And they don't need to do as much as we do, because the deck is stacked towards the Tories when it comes to winning national general elections. It always has been. And with the boundary review, they're taking another step towards stacking it further.
But it was quite interesting, wasn't it? Because Dan, when we were at a meeting the other week, this was for Hazel Grove, which is a CLP next to Stockport.
He's lying. It was an AA meeting.
There was the guy. Was it the vice chair? It was the vice chair once of Hazel Grove.
Peter Mitchell.
That's it. Pete. Yeah. And what he was saying was very very interesting. This, because you think on the face of it that the boundary review wasn't great for Labour, but he was sort of suggesting actually it wasn't as bad as what it could have been. And he was saying actually it's the Tories who were probably worrying about it a bit more, because what he was suggesting was that when you've got boundaries that have split, and you've got now some Labour vote going into what would have been a Tory seat, all of a sudden it can make that seat actually relatively unstable and actually reasonably winnable in a sort of a grand scheme of things. What he was arguing was that the creation of safe Labour seats is a bad thing. You don't want safe Labour seats under the boundary review, because your vote's too concentrated. You almost want the vote to be somewhat spread out a bit more. In order for Labour to have more chance in other constituencies. So it was just about, I mean, on the face of it, yes, we're going to lose seats, which is a bad thing. But what he was saying, I thought was quite interesting, because I never really thought about it in that way. And he'd done a lot of work on it. But ultimately, yeah, in terms of seats lost, it's not great for us at all. But I thought it was presented a bit of a balance, but more of a balanced argument, I think, to the review, which I thought was quite interesting.
If we weren't polling so badly, I'd agree. But
yes,
at this point,
that's true. Yeah.
At this point, I don't think we'd have much luck drawing second prize in the beauty contest as quote Monopoly, let alone
true.
Marginal seats. Brilliant. So obviously we've been talking about the goings on in Parliament and what we think they should do. Let's look at some real decisions that have been made this week, and the two biggest ones from one from particularly from a Labour perspective, and one for everyone, I think, which is really dangerous. Two key decisions was the decision to not have a public inquiry or any form of inquiry into the Battle of Orgreave, as it is known, or as the media love to call it. And also, in fact, no, let's deal with Orgreave first. This just stinks to me of major cover-up at this point, and I'm not a big fan of conspiracy theories.
No.
Generally, on the whole, I think it's ludicrous, but I don't see why you wouldn't want a public inquiry at this point.
Well, no, and especially after with everything that's come out with Hillsborough, and the South Yorkshire Police, there was something. It seems blatantly clear there was something inherently toxic within the South Yorkshire Police. Certainly from in terms of Hillsborough, and obviously you would now with what's come out of Hillsborough, you naturally make that link to Orgreave. And for me, we need to get to the bottom of how that force was run, and what went on there, and ultimately whether there was inherent corruption within the South Yorkshire Police, because already a couple of things that have come out out of what may have happened at Orgreave link very very much with what has come out with Hillsborough. For example, this issue to do with the statements. And the lack of proper recorded statements, just things like that. Also, there seems to be cover up there within the South Yorkshire Police. It needs to get to the bottom of it, because ultimately you've got communities there who still have a real distrust of the police, and that needs addressing, and it needs addressing urgently. And people. What really annoyed me actually in the week was the work that Andy Burnham's done in terms of Hillsborough, and people were saying, well, why didn't you call for an inquiry into Orgreave while you're in government? Well, ultimately, it's a ridiculous argument to make, because obviously while he was in government, Andy, none of that came out with Hillsborough. That's the top and bottom line of it. But now, with the revelations of what's come out of the Hillsborough inquiry, inevitably the next natural step is to have an inquiry into Orgreave, because it seems to me that there are links between the two in terms of the two incidences, and the South Yorkshire Police is the continuum, the link between the two. So naturally, something needs to be done, and I think again it's just another example of how low this government is sinking, and how all of a sudden this country is awful swing to the right. And again, this is sort of an example of this, really. Ultimately, to try and protect, to protect the police, and ultimately to protect the Tory governments of the 1980s as well, in terms of their role within this. We need answers. The people of Orgreave and the miners who are involved with that need answers, and we need them pretty quickly.
By the way, just for the younger listeners, maybe your mum or dad is listening to this in the car on the way to work, on the way to school right now. I will just point out that children, believe it or not, we were in fact in government. That was a thing. We were in government. We were on the other side of the house. Daniel.
I just want to cover one quick point, and that's about how the government has handled this in itself. Is because the impression that the campaigners for Orgreave Justice gave this week was that they were promised by the government that there would be a full public inquiry on this. So to go back on those promises is disgraceful, in my opinion.
And to get the hopes up as well.
Well, exactly. But the main thing for me, and I've just got a quick quote if I'm allowed. The Independent Police Complaints Commission last year looked at this and found that there was evidence of excessive violence by police officers. Mm-hmm. There was a false narrative from police officers which exaggerated violence from the miners. There was perjury by police officers to prosecute the arrested miners. And then there was evidence of a cover-up by senior officers to cover up that perjury. How can we not have a public inquiry when an independent body is saying that?
Let me tell you how not, Daniel, because there was no deaths at Orgreave and there were also no miscarriages of justice, so that's why we don't need a public inquiry.
I mean, what has come out of this for me is that I think Amber Rudd seems to be one of the most unprincipled politicians I've come across in a very, very, very long time. You had her, for me, you look at how she acted during, again, we've gone back to the referendum campaign, what she said on stage at the Wembley Arena during the final EU referendum debate when she was coming out saying, she would get in a taxi with Boris Johnson and so on. Now, at the time, obviously, she was pro-Remain, but now all of a sudden, you wouldn't guess she was pro-Remain with the way she's acting as Home Secretary, with everything that's coming out of, with her appalling speech at conference, which is one of the most right-wing speeches, I think, certainly from a mainstream government, or supposedly mainstream government, I have heard. And now, you've got the situation now with the fact that she has effectively, she has blocked this inquiry. And they have been taken on a merry dance, the Orgreave, the Orgreave Truth and Justice campaign. They have been taken on a merry dance. And for me, she just seems to be a patsy. And that's what's come through for me with the way that she has acted, certainly in terms of the referendum debate, in terms of she was very much on the government side there, and all of a sudden she's switched right over to the right. And with what she's come out with over the last few weeks, for me, I think again it just shows you that how toxic this government really is. And ultimately, we need an inquiry because I say, as Dan's put very, very eloquently there, with his facts rather than me just sort of thinking it really just sort of from the heart, I guess, I suppose. He summed it up very, very well in terms of, already there are hints and there's insight there in terms of what went on. And these all need to come out, and we need to make sure they come out sooner rather than later, rather than having a long drawn-out battle that goes over several years. This could be sorted out, in a relatively short space of time. And I mean, I'm not going to suggest that, I think, I'm sure that some of those who were at Orgreave that day, and some of the miners were, some of them may well have been at fault. I don't know. But we need to get to the bottom of how the
That's why we need an inquiry though, because we don't know.
Exactly. Amber Rudd's excuse this week was that it was 30 years ago, and that police will have learnt the lessons from that time. Now, I will openly say the majority of police officers do a great job, and practices have improved in that time. But how are we going to learn those lessons and make sure that we've learned them if we don't know what lessons there are to learn? And a public inquiry will identify those lessons.
And it's the fact you've still got communities who've got an inherent distrust of the police, and that will carry on for decades and decades unless this is addressed now.
At the end of the day, the attitude, I think, from a lot of people in this country now is the police go unchecked.
Yeah.
And Amber Rudd's decision and the Conservatives' decision to deny this public inquiry just affirms the public's belief that the police will go unchecked even 30 years after the events.
Yeah.
It's a case. This is, if you take out the arguments and just look at it from everybody's point of view, the police can get away unchecked without fearing about a public inquiry because nobody died. There was no miscarriage of justice.
Well, she says there's no miscarriages of justice, but how do we know? Because there hasn't been an inquiry. She won't have an inquiry. So to say that there have been no miscarriages of justice is ridiculous.
We should point out as well that it came very close to being a miscarriage of justice.
Yeah. And I tell you now, someone I've that line could well come back to haunt her. It really, really could. And I just find it a staggering decision.
I don't understand how we can move forward when we've got an uncertain future. Like, recently I was in Berlin and it struck me there how eager they are to face their past. The people there are so determined to drill into their young people especially how sketchy their past has been and how they need to learn the lessons from the past so that it doesn't repeat itself. Why can we not do the same thing here? Have the public inquiry, identify what we need to learn from Orgreave and from the injustices that happened there, we assume from the evidence from the IPCC, and then learn from those lessons to ensure that it doesn't happen again in the future, or a similar event doesn't happen.
I completely agree. We'll very quickly move on because time is starting to escape us a little bit. Another decision was the Conservatives have decided that, guess what? We spent all this money on Leverson's inquiry. Maybe we won't implement the majority of it.
Again, this comes back to the point about the establishment, doesn't it?
It doesn't, yeah.
That suddenly, despite Theresa May's first speech on the steps of Downing Street in July, the establishment are now closing ranks. They are trying still to cover up the mistakes of the past, trying to stop the public identifying those mistakes and taking action on them. And I think that's exactly what this is. Leverson identified problems and mistakes that have been made in the past by the media and set out very clearly his recommendations. So why are we not progressing those to a further stage where we can then start to implement them?
Exactly. It's like treating the Leverson's recommendations like a pick and mix buffet. It's like, oh yeah, I'll have some of the shrimp and the the various other things, but I'm not going anywhere near that. I'm not going anywhere near the rest of it. It's pick and mix. It's take what you want, and that's not how wasting millions. Well, not wasting, but it is wasting millions and millions of taxpayers' money if you're not going to implement the damn recommendations. An inquiry that took a lot of time, a lot of evidence, and a lot of money. You know what I mean? It's frustrating. I was listening to this on Today in Parliament the other day, and just hearing the justification for we're not going to implement. We're going to look at not implementing Part 2. David.
Well, again, I guess it links into Orgreave to a point, because I think, what was it, when Theresa May did that speech, when she just handed the role of Prime Minister by her MPs. She stood outside Number 10 and she said, we will think not of the powerful but of you. And it's like, well, there we go. It just shows you the utter hypocrisy of our current Prime Minister, because this, she isn't thinking of us. She isn't thinking of the general public. She's thinking of the powerful. And when we say when I talk about the powerful, it's the likes of Rupert Murdoch, who are ultimately, again, not going to be held to account once again. And again, it links into the public trust into the police again. Because obviously, what Leverson 2 would look at, it would look at the link between the newspapers and the role of the police. And again, when we're talking about the public trust in the police, again, it's not being addressed. They've got opportunities in which to put trust back into public institutions, and they're being spurned and they're being ignored just to suit their own means. And again, it's just very, very frustrating. And again, it just shows you, how toxic this government really is, and how really we need to start getting on top of them, quickly. Well, not even quickly. We need to get on top of them now, because. Again, I've seen, again, it links into the wider issue, I guess, with the leadership and so on, which I'm not going to try and touch too much, really. But again, we've seen glimpses whereby, we've been able to hold the government much more to account and more effectively recently, like I say, over Brexit. But we've still got some work to go, and we've got to start we've got to start providing effective opposition within the Commons, a lot more than we have been recently. And this is another prime example where really I don't know whether we've provided it as much as we should have done.
The problem is, though, there's nothing we can question. We can question all day long. The Orgreave debate, the situation in the chamber over Orgreave, we can question them, we run all we want, but at the end of the day, there's nothing we can do about it other than question her. We can't do anything but that. In our current position.
Well, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, but I mean,
and let's just do a bit of a spot the difference here at this point from because you were talking about like the public perception. The Conservative Party conference, which was nearly 2 months ago now, a little bit less, and Theresa May and a lot of the other speakers were selling the Conservatives as the new party of the people, the party of the working class, as well as everybody else that they used to be the party of. And you look at them then, and now you look at them now, and look at the events of the past couple of weeks, and they are just showing that they are the same old party that is pro-establishment, pro-looking after their own, pro-looking after anyone that's got enough money that really they should be looking after themselves. And at the end of the day, it's true, the Tory party have become, the nasty party has become the nasty government.
I mean,
and this is the thing, if there is a general election next year or the year after or whenever it happens, we need, as well as presenting our own party policies, we need to be highlighting these inequalities that are being emphasised by the Tory government to the public so that they aren't voting them back in again.
But they're buying it. Buying it. This is the problem. The Tories are getting away with all this. Yeah. And the polls are showing that they're increasing the lead.
I mean, we've seen, like, with the government now, we've seen these sort of the re-emergence of, I guess, of a social conservatism, haven't we? And they're just trying to define that as the new centre ground, but it's not up to political parties to define the centre ground. It's the electorate who define the centre ground. I mean, we can provide the arguments out there we can put the arguments out there, to try and persuade people, but ultimately, I mean, this sort of new centre ground, it's up to voters and the electorate we've got to engage more with voters and the electorate in terms of trying to discover what they believe the centre ground is, because at the moment we've got the Tories saying they're trying to define the centre ground themselves, but ultimately it's the voters and the electorate who will define that for us.
I just want to come in at this point because I've suggested this in a couple of conversations recently. And Mr. Corbyn, Mr. Watson, if you are listening, which I'm sure you are, this is obviously clearly must listen to every UK Labour member. Instead of having the campaign day on the 26th of November with the NHS, which, as I've seen it at the moment, is basically, let's just go and protest against the Tories. Instead, why don't we do a national exercise in actually going out and listening to the electorate? Let's put together a survey, let's put together a list of questions regarding the areas that we as a party feel quite shaky on, and the media point at us and say we're quite shaky on, and our conversations with non-Labour members show that we're shaky on. And let's go and do a mass door knocking exercise, a mass street stall exercise, a mass day where instead of us going out and telling the electorate this is what they want, let's go out and let's listen to what the electorate want from us. Because that is it, because we have spent the last 18 months arguing amongst ourselves what the electorate want on all sides.
And
it's about time we actually found out what they actually want, because it's clear at the moment we have got nowhere near based on the current polling.
If we conducted politics whereby we went out and spoke to people and we just asked them what's most important to you, rather than for us or political party to say we think this is the most important thing, can you imagine how different politics could be if we just went and asked people what's the most important thing to you, and then we shaped our political, our policies and our perspectives and our direction just off what people tell us, rather than for us to say, well, we believe this is the most important thing. But ultimately, you're delivering what people would what people want ultimately. I mean, I guess you've got to be careful with that, because what people want isn't necessarily what it would be for the greater good of the country. But if we conducted a politics whereby we just went and asked people what was the most important thing to them, and then we took that on board and tried to address those points, I think that's how we could define what the centre ground is, rather than having political parties and the Conservatives saying we're now making a play, or we're trying to restructure, or we're trying to cover what we think is now the centre ground. I just think we need to it's having that engagement, it's going out and speaking to people.
I'm sorry, it's just dawned on me. I have made a fundamental and huge mistake.
What?
Mentioning that listening exercise. I am going to get 100 emails and tweets and Facebook comments after this saying, that is such a Kinnock idea. How dare you? Labour listens. You Kinnockite.
It's right, we've lost that listening element to politics, if we ever had it properly. But not only that, but engaging, not only listening, but going back and saying, this is what we've heard from you, this is what we want to do for you, to address those concerns.
I just honestly think that we have spent too much time as a party over the past 2 years, but longer than that. Mm-hmm. Right back to sort of the 10 election and Brown.
Yep.
We have spent too long telling the electorate this is what they need, this is what they want. We are the party of the people, the party of the working class, the party of the working people. We need to go and reconnect with the electorate, rather than us sitting here in Labour clubs and meeting halls across the country and debating amongst ourselves what the electorate want. I think we all need to get out there and actually go and listen to them.
I was having a bit of a conversation, a bit of a sort of a to and fro on Twitter the other day with someone, and we were talking about Gordon Brown, and I sort of put it out there, was the whole the Gillian Duffy incident, was that the moment that Brexit began? Was that very moment whereby was that the sort of the starting point of where things have led to this point? Now, obviously, it's hindsight. It's all it was
the point Brown realised he wasn't winning that election.
Well, yes, definitely that. Yeah, but again, it was.
And I just
go on. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I just want to counter as well. I know we all do door knocking exercises at branch constituency level across the country, but it's not just about that. It's about collating that information. It's about getting all that information and collating it.
Yeah.
It would be a huge undertaking. The National Party down in London at headquarters would have to put in some serious work, but I think it would be worth so much.
Well, I mean, when we go out with voter ID sheets and everything else, it's just a case of having that question, isn't it? Having that question on a voter ID sheet, or having that there ready, and then recording that response, and then ultimately we can use that. Certainly, if we had it as a national exercise, that would be brilliant. But even if we could have it as a local exercise, and then from there, once we take that data in, we can use that to try and support what we're trying to do. Sort of, obviously, when we talk about Stockport, we can use that to try and influence what we're doing within Stockport. But it would be, to have it as a national exercise would be brilliant. And if we're talking now about, particularly with the Labour Party becoming much more of a membership-driven party, so more bottom up. Again, I think really that sort of exercise should really, I would have thought, would have appealed very, very much to the leadership, to Jeremy, and certainly to particularly, I think, to a lot more of the newer membership as well. So I think doing something like that, I think, would be really, really invaluable. And
the listeners' task for this week is to tweet at. I'm not going to give the Twitter handles. Tweet Jeremy Corbyn. Tweet Tom Watson. Tweet Ian McNichol. Anyone have missed off that list? Tweet those three and say, go listen to the Left Wing. They have a very interesting idea. It's obviously the way forward. Sort it out, and then obviously make sure you give full credit to the guys that came up with it. Right, we are running out of time, so we are very quickly going to cover the one big topic that is obviously going to be the centre point of the next 7 days in politics, and that will be the US presidential election, which they're going to the polls on Tuesday. It's Sunday when we're recording this, by the way, so if we all make like amazing predictions, we've not recorded this after it's happened. We are recording this on Sunday night. So, Trump versus Clinton. I'll come to you first, Daniel, and what I want very briefly is your opinion about the campaign so far, about the campaign, because it's pretty much over now, and what you think the result will be on Tuesday.
The campaign, what is there to say? The campaign has been shocking in my opinion, mainly from one perspective, but from both sides really. I just don't think either of them have ran good quality campaigns. And the shameful thing is, I think if the Democrats had put a good candidate forward, they'd have run away with this election months ago, because Trump just isn't a favourable character for the White House. And if he was against a strong Democrat candidate, I think they would have walked it a good while ago. And that's nothing personal against Hillary, but I think her past particularly has prevented her from being popular, and the fact that she just doesn't seem able to engage with people. It is more of what we were saying earlier about a top-down approach. She just seems she is the establishment. She's part of the establishment, and Americans can see that, I think, and that's why the polls are so close. My prediction, obviously, is that Hillary will win. I don't think it will be by any significant margin. I hope she will win, because I think Trump is a threat to the planet if he becomes president.
Threat to the planet.
But I don't think it will be. I don't think Hillary will win by any significant margin if she does win. I think it will be very close.
I'm just going to screw this up at this point, but you mentioned tight margin. I can't remember, was it 2002 Bush Gore?
Yes.
Yeah, 2002. You thought that was close. You thought they were arguing over that one. I have a feeling, based over the past few days, that one may look like a landslide.
The other thing is the influence of the FBI director. If Trump actually wins by a narrow margin, and it is proven that the FBI director acted outside of his permit as FBI director, and potentially broke the law to influence an election, then there could be massive consequences.
Do they not have Perdar in America?
I don't think so.
There are laws.
Clearly not.
There are laws in place to prevent figures such as the FBI director from influencing elections, and I think I agree with Hillary in this and the Democrat camp. There seems to have been a hypocrisy from the FBI director, in that their current FBI investigation into Russia and computer hacking in the US, the FBI director didn't want to share details of that. And I know there are potential links between Trump and Putin, but then on the same front, he's been keen then to emphasise this investigation into Hillary Clinton. Now, if he is actually found to have influenced the election and Trump wins by a small margin, I don't know what that leads to consequence-wise. Massive implications.
I blame Amber Rudd. Because I think the FBI director's looked at it and gone, well, no one's died and there's not been a miscarriage of justice. So basically, as long as we follow those rules in life, we're all good.
Yep.
David!
I mean, I don't like making predictions over anything anymore, especially after this.
You're gonna hate coming on this show, then. Back on episode 98 when I'm playing this audio back to you.
Gosh, I mean, it was interesting what Dan said there about the FBI director, because I've been thinking, imagine if Hillary, hopefully Hillary will get elected in the week, but if all this came out after she'd been elected, imagine the uproar that would cause then. That's what I keep thinking. I just think, she could be dragged, a sitting president would be dragged through the mire even more there, and you'd get cries of impeachment and all that sort of
the second Clinton to face impeachment.
This is it. And so I've been sort of thinking, well, if this is going to come out, is it actually now the better time? Because she's still got a reasonable lead in the polls. She should still win. I'm not saying she will win, but she should still win. So in that sense, is it better for this to come out now, where she's still got a realistic or more than a realistic chance of winning, versus it coming out when if she becomes president, which then will open up a whole load of mess. But I don't know. I mean, it's I guess it's difficult to say, isn't it? But I think she will win in the week. I think she'll win on Tuesday night. Again, whether it's by what margin, I don't know. I mean, I guess it depends what poll you look at ultimately, and obviously where in terms of how the electoral college works, obviously with which states she manages to pick up. But yeah, I think she'll win. I think she'll win, but
we are not biased in any way.
I don't say with any degree of certainty, really, because it's funny actually. My mum, she's like your typical working class sort of Tory voter, really, my mum, and she's been a sort of a political clairvoyant over the last year. Everything that's happened, she's managed to get right. And she's convinced Trump will win.
No. You talk about political clairvoyance. There is no one better than the thick of it.
Yes.
The amount of stuff that they have mocked in a script and then has come true. Go back and watch The Spinners and Losers and The Rise of the Nutters, those two specials, and then tell me that hasn't been the Labour Party over the last 18 months. I want to say this. I am not as convinced as I was that Clinton will win. I think we've got concerns. Mm-hmm. Again, you've got closet Republicans that never usually show in the polls, and so Republicans always come out with a better share of the vote than they poll. Also, the Clinton campaign must know more than we do, because a major danger signal for me has been her choice in campaign locations over the past few days.
Yeah,
she has gone from battlegrounds to what you would consider to be safe Democrat seats. And Trump has countered that by going into Democratic safe seats. They may know, their polling may indicate something that has not come out in the public polls. But Daniel made the perfect point, and that is, if Hillary is not trouncing Donald Trump, there is something seriously wrong with Hillary Clinton. She should be wiping the floor with him. Trump is the gift that keeps on giving when it comes to the left in America. And if we got a version in the UK, Nigel Farage, imagine if Nigel Farage was going up against us, if he was the leader of the Conservative Party, we would have a field day with him. Clinton should have had a field day with Trump. It's like all your Christmases coming at once, and at this stage in the game, for it to be this close.
I mean, if there is a result like, I think it was 2000, I think, 2000, 2004, 2008, 12. So yeah, so it was 2000, the Bush Gore election, wasn't it? I think 2000. If we had a result like 2000 where it all hinged on one state and in a matter of a couple of thousand votes and all this and that, oh God, I'd worry. I would worry in terms of. I'm
going to go one further than not just say. I think it is fairly clear that it's going to be tight, but I honestly still can't see Trump winning it.
No, and I can't.
But
you would hope not.
I am going to go one further, and hopefully we'll be around in 4 years, and hopefully I'll be able to play this audio back in 4 years and look like a genius. Clinton wins this time, but she will not be a two-term president.
I'm wondering that.
It depends who the Republican candidate is.
I think you could pick Miss Piggy, and she does not win a second term.
I don't know, because if you looked at Mitt Romney as an example, I don't think he'd beat Clinton for a second term.
I think John McCain has another go. I think McCain would beat him.
It's not whether it should be a 2-term. It isn't necessarily whether it would be she would lose against a Republican. It's whether she'd gain the nomination again. She might not gain it. You would think she would. But if Michelle Obama,
I was going to say
they have a very strong precedent to not challenge in the primary.
You would think that you would think that wouldn't happen. But at the same time, I don't like predicting anything anymore.
Nothing's impossible.
It could theoretically happen if Clinton has a really bad term and refuses to let go. I mean, we could theoretically get into the position where Clinton only does one term and says, you know what, I'm not going to even bother trying to stand for a second term because I will be what Trump is in this election, next election. And the biggest question, and I'm stealing this line from somebody, by the way, if you have Sky, go and watch Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. Basically, every episode over the past 2 months, he has covered the US election brilliantly. But Americans, you need to be asking yourselves the question: how did you get in this position to begin with? You should have never have been in this position.
Yeah. I mean, the real positive thing is that ultimately, come Tuesday evening, we've had a black president, and by Tuesday evening we could have a female president. So it's sort of fine lines, isn't it? Because we could have one of the most probably one of the most, if not the most extreme right-wing president we'd probably perhaps ever see, certainly within the sort of 21st century, certainly more right-wing I would have thought than Reagan and the like, but yet we could have such a, in terms of equality and so on, we could have a decision that will go the other way, and I'm going to keep that positive thought in my mind. It just shows you sort of the fine line in terms of what could be achieved.
The key decider will be how many people go out and vote.
Yeah.
A lot of people. I think this will probably be the lowest turnout.
If Democrat supporters don't go out and vote, they will be handing the election to Trump.
Yeah, because he has got very passionate base. Indeed. Here's a quick question, and because we've really got to start wrapping it up. Do you think Sanders beats Trump if Sanders had won the primary?
No.
No, that's a trick.
The American Corbyn.
I would probably have said no. No, I don't think he would have done.
Do you think Trump beats Sanders?
I do.
Easily?
Not easily.
Not easily, no, I wouldn't have thought. I mean, don't get me wrong, if you had a Bernie Sanders standing over here, I think we could have been on,
we have, he's called Jeremy Corbyn.
I don't know if
they're not similar.
No, I would argue they're not the same. Let's not go into that now.
Yeah.
But no, I don't think Sanders would have won it. Even against Trump, and that is a scary prospect.
I think he's far.
I
think in terms of America as a country, I think he's far too over towards.
Public opinion was against him from the start.
Here's one as well. I was listening to another podcast, which I'm not going to plug because if you're on iTunes right now, you need to be listening and subscribing to us and nobody else. I heard a very interesting point on a podcast the other day, and that was Trump could possibly be, in terms of foreign policy, the better choice over Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, I've heard that as well. Yeah.
Because you could imagine a de-escalation with Russia.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Through that, and Trump very much doesn't want the interventionist approach that America has followed over the past 40 years.
Yeah, but we'd see how long that would last, wouldn't we? Because it would only take. I think it would only take, God forbid, one terrorist incident to take place on American soil, and then that would be the true test of his foreign policy credentials. Because would he has he got the I'm going to put it, has he got not the patience, but sort of the sort of rational approach, I think, in which you need to take, rather than being a knee-jerk response. Because I think for him, all I see with him is sort of someone who would jump to a knee-jerk reaction. It's difficult, isn't it? I mean, I'd take that argument in terms of his sort of relationship, I guess, with Putin, in a sense. I guess in that way, it would result in a de-escalation, but it would only take one thing to happen, which could result in something that's really knee-jerk. And that's my worry, if anything.
Okay, prediction number 2. I've just come to it now. Donald Trump wins the Nobel Peace Prize. If he wins the election, Trump wins the Peace Prize in 2018 after coming to a peaceful arrangement with both Russia and Iran. Daniel's just like, nope.
I'm in disbelief. Obviously, I hope he doesn't win the election anyway, but I hope he certainly wouldn't win a Nobel Peace Prize. I think.
No, but
I certainly won't defend some of Hillary's past when it comes to foreign policy, but I think with Trump as president, Putin will become even more aggressive and will think he's got even more free reign across the world. We've already seen this kind of domineering stance from Russia over the past couple of years, and I think that would only seek to exacerbate it because he would think the US won't challenge him as much as they have been doing so far.
That's a good counterpoint. Actually, I didn't really see it that way. Maybe my mind's been changed there. Actually, right. Let's wrap this up. By the way, just quickly, are you going to be watching the results on Tuesday night? Not good for a UK.
Not live because I will be in work on Wednesday.
Yeah, that's the same with me. I might be able to stay up a little bit. I'm going to try my best. So I always try and stay up for anything else.
Let us know on Twitter at the Left Wing Show how you're going to be spending election night on Tuesday, and that is all we have time for because we are blatantly overran the hour of which I tried to set. But luckily, we're not live. We don't have time slots, so it's all good. My thank you to the wonderful David Meller.
Thank you very much.
David, Twitter handle?
Oh, it's David P. Meller. Meller spelled Meller. I'm not the disgraced Tory politician.
So if you all want to get angry at Daniel for his comment, not Daniel. Yeah, if you want to get angry at Daniel,
please do put it on David.
He's not got Twitter. So if you're angry at Daniel or David or my comments on tonight's podcast, it's at David P. Meller.
Yeah, David.
ER at the end.
ER, yeah.
Thank you very much. And again, Great Manchester Fabians. Check them out. All the information. Search the Fabian Society. You'll find it there somewhere. And my thank you to the wonderful Daniel Oliver.
Thank you very much for having us. Definitely, it's been very enjoyable.
Remember, if you are in the Stockport area and looking at joining Stockport Young Labour, there is an event on the 7th at
7 miles out.
Job done. And there's a Facebook group, Stockport Young Labour. Search for that. Quick plug of how to keep in touch with us and keep following and let me know how bad this episode has been. Search on the Facebook for The Left Wing. You'll recognise the logo on the page because it's a blatant rip-off of The West Wing. See what I did there. You can also get in touch with us on Twitter at The Left Wing Show, or if you want to get in touch, if you want to write a huge complaint letter that spans over 140 characters, you can email me at theleftwingpodcast@gmail.com. If you're interested on other ways of finding this podcast, we're available on SoundCloud. The link is soundcloud.com/The Left Wing Podcast. You can also find us on iTunes. Again, just search The Left Wing. And also, we have a slightly snazzier version on the YouTube channel, which will involve pictures. For instance, right now I am showing a picture of me, Daniel and David after we've recorded this. So if you fancy a little bit more, the Left Wing YouTube channel is the place to go. I may also upload the occasional Left Wing extra based on if there's a major event that breaks in between recording sessions. I will be back next week with another 2 guests. I don't want to say names yet because I might not. It's not confirmed, but there will be 2 other people joining me on the show. I've been David Allum, and I really want to thank you all for watching or listening to this debut episode of The Left Wing. It will get better, I promise you guys. Have a great week. On Twitter, we are